especially with high school kids. Um, what I would say is that the lesson always began simply from this old lesson, and I know that many of you probably have done this with your classes, and that's the continuous line journey. When we talk about line, we say a line is a connection between point A and point B. So I could simply just say, take the easiest, dullest route and connect this 2 points. But the idea of continuous line journey is making journeys that connect point A and point B in an interesting journey, almost like taking a trip, walking. And when I taught realistic drawing, it was the same thing. You are always taking a journey with your line, whether you're following the contours of what you're trying to draw or doing something like this. So these are a great little day-to-day things you can do in a day or two. The one thing I always did focus on is not just the variety of line, but the thickness and thinness, the ability to taper a line, break a line, have broken line. And then we really start talking about the characteristics of line and abstraction. So when we start to talk about abstraction, this is what and it's so beat up because I've had it probably since 1985 when I first started teaching. This old Kodak ad. Can we all see that? The painting is, does anybody know the name of the painting is? I'm going to quiz my class. You can take your mics off and we're allowed to talk in my class.
Is it a Velasquez?
It is a Velasquez. This is that famous painting called the Blue Boy, right? And so it's hard to, I don't know if it's hard to see here. I should have probably just put it, but it has the original copy. And this is how I took this literally in my class in 19 something, taped it onto a piece of cardboard and used it for the rest of my career. And the copy is what gets me. In 1770, the best way to get a great portrait was to hire a professional. And that would always start my discussion on why abstract art and what caused it to happen. And the answer, in many ways, is not just the science and physics and everything else that was going on, was the invention of the camera. Before the camera, you had to hire somebody, and the person who was an artist painted what we saw, like when you take a photograph. But after the camera and all the things, the invention, the Industrial Revolution, slowly and surely, art started to change. And we started to see that artists, like musicians, kids can understand this concept better than art. You say to them, well, don't you see how classical music is different than jazz music, which is different than rock and roll music, which is different than hip hop? I said, every one of those musical styles was invented and pioneered by artists who gave us a new way of thinking and looking about music. And if you talk to them about art, say, if art was always realistic and then it moved into other ways. So when you look at a museum, you say, why is that art? That's not art. So the idea, again, is this idea of abstract formalism. And really, it's the idea of looking at art, not just for what it realistically represents, but for the forms, lines, shapes, and colors, and how it encapsulates the elements of art. And to do that, I guess we could get started. I would like us, if you all have paper, to take one long sheet, and we're just going to do some. It's never, let's get started, let's do the assignment right off the bat on the good paper. It's always a sequential skill building. And that's how you guarantee success for kids on whatever level. If you give them the steps-by-step sequential skills, then you're working, it's going to help them make the final product that much better. So what I have here, and this is how Mr. Asaro used to teach, nothing was on computer. Everything was on a flex cam that was put on the board and kids copied it into their sketchbooks, and then we started doing the drawings. So if the aim or the learning target, whatever the flavor of the day was, create an abstract figure design, we talked about what abstract means, moving away from reality, and that abstract art can have real figures that you see and you can see what they are. And I know figurative is more about the human figure, but I use that term to tend to art where, like, you're looking at an abstract piece and say, oh, that's a guitar, that's a bird, that's that. I could see that. And then you look at other abstract art where you don't recognize anything. It's completely non-objective. There might be a better word, and maybe I'm wrong in just saying that, because when I look at figurative art, I think of the human figure, but that's what I use with the kids. And then the elements of art are the same, whether you're realistically drawing and doing looking at a Rembrandt or looking at a clay. There is simply, the elements don't change. It's how the artists choose to use them. So we're focusing on line, shape, and color, value, types of lines. And the first thing we talk about is mechanical lines and natural lines. And that's the basis for beginning this assignment. I'm going to quickly share out some, because before I get into this whole talk, I did have that on here, and I just want to quickly look at a few paintings that I might be using with my students in that kind of thing. And that's, okay, so when you're talking about cubism, the idea that not focusing in on the object you're drawing, but looking at the object from many different perspectives. And I asked them to find objects that they could recognize and see how that the artist is walking around the subject as he's painting. This is more of a painting similar to Kandinsky. I think it's I don't even know who the artist is. P. Piper on WordPress. That's all I found. But this is very similar to what we're going to be doing in our project. Kandinsky has to be the father of totally non-objective art. His connection, like how he even named his paintings, by numbers and compositions, like a musician would, and focusing on the elements and principles of art rather than the objects or the what you could recognize. One of my favorite movements is the German Expressionist, and this Mark painting is one of the ones I used all the time. The idea of how taking the forest and then starting to abstract what's happening in the forest. The kids would love finding, how many deers can you find? And if you look closely, 1, 2, 3, 4, there's another one here. So laying down, then who finds the birds, the excitement the kids get just finding the work within it. When you look at more cubism like Ferdinand Ledger, you're looking at mechanical design. These two are good examples of mechanical designs. Why here we have organic or more natural designs. So that's some of the things I would share with students. So, but let's start working. So the first thing I would do, and you can do this in pen or pencil, is I would say to the kids on, this is our worksheet paper, I would ask them just to put a series of dots across down one side of the paper, because we've written in definition that that a line is a visual connection between one point and another. And then I would ask them to think about, what does a natural line look like? And we saw examples. I would show examples, and I'd ask them to connect one point to the other point directly across using natural lines. They could cross over. You could do really anything you want. It's free form. There's no geometric shapes. It's not predictable. It could go any way you want. And I would just have them put an end there. That's a good example of a natural line. At the next time I would say, let's look at mechanical lines. And of course, showing them pictures, even just looking around the classroom, which is all mechanical lines, geometric, straight lines. I often count a circle or a half circle as mechanical, because when you look at buildings, that you can see that. Another thing I tell my students is, are there any straight or perfectly round lines in nature? And I struggle to have them think of one. Can anybody think of a perfectly straight or perfectly round line in nature? Does anybody have any ideas of what might be perfectly straight or round in nature?
No.
Perfectly round would be the sun.
Right, except when you approached the sun and saw that it was actually a fiery ball of organic mess. So, and they always say the horizon, until you get to the horizon, and it's a choppy sea ready to kill you. So there's no such thing as perfect straight lines in nature, and so mechanical lines are lines that are produced by people, and natural lines are lines that we find around us in the natural world. So I would then label this as mechanical. Now these two lines are pretty much non-objective. I can't really point out. I can say, oh, that reminds me of this, or that reminds me of something. But then I would start, especially with the kids who really liked, the kids in the major art. I would start saying, let's talk about figurative lines, like we see in abstractions, like when people are putting parts of the figure in the line. So I would say, let's try to do a natural line, but let's try to, as we're making our line, let's try to make that line sort of have things that remind people of things. All right, let's just see if we're... Right. So let's make lines that kind of have, that people will say, wow, in my journey, look, there's a man yelling at the dog or the horse and the tree like bush kind of thing. So now people are looking at my line and they're keying into symbols. And this and then we would just call this a figurative natural. And then I would say, let's do one in mechanical the same way. Now, mechanical often gets me like robot. I always do the robot man. I would try to do the whole, I'm going to try to do the same line mechanically. Oh, I messed up. See, I made it curved when there are no curves in my mechanical line. No curves allowed. It's mechanical. Keith Haring would be proud of me. Again, try to keep straight. It's hard to get into the habit, but remember, and then I have the kids do, I went natural here. Wrong. Don't worry. Mistakes are what I do all the time. Mistakes are great. And that's the one thing about teaching art, right? That if we can eliminate the fear of making mistakes within our students, that's why students don't like art. They're afraid that it's not good enough or it's a mistake. And if you can show them every mistake is an opportunity to really just find another creative solution, that's the greatest thing. And I can't tell you how many sixth grade parents would come to me after a semester in my class and said, my child was mortified when they saw art on their program. And now they come home and they talk about how it's their favorite class. And that's what we can do as art teachers. I don't know on the high school level, but on the middle school level, it's the greatest gift you could give a child, to make them understand that you don't want art to be like, I hate math, I can't do this. I hate art, I can't do this. You really want them to love art, and that's a teacher. And whether they become artists or not, it doesn't matter. At least they remember that they have a love of art and they don't go to a museum with a bad feeling in their stomach. And they can learn to talk about it. And that's the greatest thing I always got from talking to parents that open school night, when they would come in and tell me, I can't believe my son didn't want to do any art in grade school. Now he's here and she's here and she wants to. And then the kids that I got as they got older, and if I got them into my advanced program, some of them, I changed their lives completely. Ended up going to, we have some great art schools here in New York City, and ended up going there. So I have some other samples here. Obviously, I didn't do these overnight. This is how I taught for years. If I had to teach a lesson, I had a big cardboard box, and my lesson was in, I don't know if you can see me on that camera. My lesson was in that box. Everything was analog. Everything was hands-on. And so here's some other examples. You can see figurative natural, figurative mechanical. So I have buildings, people, line trip. I even put my name. You could start writing your name, especially if the kids know script. You could put your name into the designs. Fighting dinosaurs, cars, and planes. Really, it's endless what you can do. So having said that, let's do this. Like if we were now, the kids are practiced. They've done about 20 or 30 different lines. They've handed it in. The first one was this. Remember, they came in and they gave me these. These were exit slips on the way out. Please give them to me. Let's see what you're doing. Then this was the next day, the next 2 days or whatever of doing these. So then I just get a big paper. Now, I would never use copy paper because I'm going to make a watercolor. I would use larger, thicker paper, whether it was second-hand found paper. It didn't have to be expensive watercolor paper. Anything that could hold watercolor was good for me. But for tonight, I'm going to just use copy paper. Step one. Now, when I did frames with my kids, it's paper. I just had 18-inch rulers, and I said, okay, let's make a frame. Put the ruler at the edge of the paper and draw the other side, and do this around all four sides. But since I'm working on such small paper, I don't want to occupy so much of my space. So for tonight, I'm going to just do it the way I know how to do it, which is just make sure I leave the negative space. It looks correct. And I just tell them, make a frame. That frame is, again, where you can scribble. And that's why I like to do it as wide as the ruler. That gave me a uniform frame that everybody had room. if you want to scribble some samples, or if you want to, when it's time to add color, especially, you want to try a color, you want to dab your brush on the side. It's right on the same paper that you're painting on. You want to release some color or add more color. So that frame is important. And I didn't just do this for this assignment. Almost every assignment I had, the first part was always to make a frame to give you workspace on the outer edge of your paper. And also, when you're collecting work, say something gets ripped or torn. Well, you've got a little barrier there to protect the paper from that precious work that you're doing in the middle. Okay. Stephanie, how do I know when it's time to move on?
Keep going.
Okay.
You're
Next step.
doing fine.
Thank you. I told Stephanie I was nervous. I felt like I was back in my first day in my classroom. I remember the sweat was dripping down my back. 23 years old at 1985. Oh my God. Now I'm retired. And it would be great, except this little pandemic caused everybody else in the world to come home with me. Okay, so the next step is, this is really a triptych assignment. So you could talk about what a triptych is, but it's not a traditional triptych. Is then I tell them to literally fold the paper in 3 to make 3 equal squares. Now, technically the middle.
Sorry.
What does that sound?
That's an alert on my computer.
Oh, okay.
Can't
Now-
mute it without muting everything else.
I see.
So.
So now, sounds like Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. I think the trolley was going to come.
Oh
next.
yeah.
So the good thing about this is the center part is going to be the widest, because your border is going to occupy a little bit of the each side, which is fine, because I really want a lot of the metamorphosis or the change to happen in the center. So once I've done that, then it's very simple. Lightly in pencil, you can come in here and divide your composition into 3 parts. Now, I tell kids they could work top to bottom, or they could work side to side. It really doesn't matter. And I'm you all is, if I share my screen now, first, I want you to look at these paintings that the kids did, and tell me if you. What says my internet? Okay, there. And tell me if you could notice something from the left to right. What is consistently happening when you go from left to right, or from top to bottom? And let's see if you were in my classroom, I would give you extra bonus merit points if you could point it out. Anybody? I'll stay here for a while. Anybody can see what
you
is
have different types of lines.
right. So what is in all of them?
Transition to natural.
Exactly. Each one of these designs starts organically and ends mechanically, or vice versa. Look at them carefully. Everyone starts one way and ends the opposite way. So it's really kind of, I call it a metamorphosis or a triptych, where you're going from one stage to the other. So stage 1 is one stage. I don't care if you start mechanically or organic or naturally, organically. I don't care if, but one stage is going to be is, the one is going to be the opposite, and in the middle is where the 2 will be married, where the 2 will make a change. They'll just somewhere in the middle, they'll change over. And that's the simplicity of this lesson, which just really, this is a lesson, I mean, many lessons I get from other places, but this is a lesson one night just came to my head, and it took me a couple of years to kind of get all the kinks out of it. And I'm loving that I could share it with you. So I'm going to stop sharing and let's get right to it. So here's kind of a what I would give to my students for like teaching points. The simplest first thing to do is, just like when we did the first one, a line, one point to another, I would say, okay, we're going. And then when we did the practice, wherever they are, here they are. When we did this, we had connecting points. It was always connecting points. So it's very simple. I'm going to ask them to put 4 or 6 dots on each edge. And maybe I could keep this like this and this like this, so I could do it while I could have, oh yeah, that works great. Everybody can see it? Yes? Okay. So it doesn't, the lines don't have to match up. They don't have to be equally on the same parallel. So I'm going to pick, let's pick the middle. I'm going to just pick 5. You could do 4. You could do 6. They don't have to be even. They don't have to be the same distance apart. I put 5 dots there. Now I'm going to go here and I'm going to put 5 dots anywhere you want on that line. I'm making them dark, but obviously you would do it lighter. Okay. And I would just keep doing that. It's always the dots. I'm going to make 5, 5, 5. And so this whole lesson is just an expansion on the simple lesson that we do as art teachers, connect a visual connection from one point to another. Okay. Do not need to make dots line up. Connect points. Okay, so it's as simple as this now, where I'm going to say, I'm going to start mechanically. And I have them draw in pencil mechanically if they want. And then later on, when they do the Sharpie, or some kids prefer to use brush and ink, but it's a little harder. But if they do, I give it to them. I tell them then they could use a ruler. But at this point, I don't want you to focus on the ruler and turning and doing this. I just want you to focus on making a really interesting line. And I don't want you to connect this point to the point corresponding across from it. Because then you'll just have 5 strips going across, which might be good for a kind of a landscape looking thing. But you really want to develop now, you want to show how interesting lines make even more interesting shapes. And how or geometric lines, mechanical lines make geometric shapes, and organic lines make, natural lines make organic. So I might say, I'm going to connect this point to this point. Okay, so I'm going to say mechanical. I'm going to start mechanical. Can you see pencil or should I work in pen? Let's see. What if I just work in pencil really darker?
We could see that.
And the other thing is I don't have the best table. I'm getting bumps as I draw. When I need to put a board underneath me. 1 second. Thank you, U.S. Post Office. You know, I still have these boxes. When I had to keep folders in my class, Jocelyn, if you're still there, Jocelyn was one of my observers, and she's here tonight. She knows the importance of these. I would have these in my classroom for every desk, and everybody would put their folders in one of these boxes, so that when they came out, one person would get the box that was labeled for their group and bring it to their table. And it would really make a great way of organizing. Thanks to the U.S. Post Office, our tax dollars hard at work. Okay, so, sorry. So I'm just going to make a connection. This is a mechanical line.
You ate them all, baby. Yes, you did. I gave you the whole plate earlier.
Now, if I want to make something like a building, this is still not working. I'm sorry. I think I might work with the marker.
Oh, Mario, unmute yourself. I'm sorry.
Okay, there you go.
There you go. Sorry
So
about
my whole thing about the box, was that not even heard?
that. No, we heard your box.
Okay, so now I've gone from here to here. The next step here is I am going to continue this line to another point. And that line is going to, again, start mechanically. But at the same time, it is then at some point going to turn into a natural line. and go to another point. And then I'm going to finish this line here as all natural. And again, I'm going to see as I go through, I'm going to try to fill my space. A lot like the line trip, a lot like the line journey, I want to make interesting shapes. Now, there's one thing you have to tell your students. It's a big thing. Avoid putting lines too close together. Making many tiny shapes will give them a fit when it's time to paint later. So when it starts to make shapes, it says here, no, do not connect with dots straight across. Lines will overlap to make abstract shapes. Focus on interesting lines and shapes as they create and fill the space. So I would continue in here, say I would go here, and I would then, as I get busier, I would see where is there not a lot happening, and that's where I want things to happen. And the minute I make the crossover, I'm starting to make shapes. All right, so now I decide to go from here. I'm going to say, oh, look at all the space I have in here. And I'm going to come in here and I'm going to then, again, start mechanically. And be careful where I go over. You could do animals. You don't have to do, you don't have to put figures in it at all. It could be totally abstract, not objective. But the most interesting things are when you have these figures coming in and then you have this kind of Picasso-esque kind of figures appearing out of anywhere because of the shapes as they go. Now here, I don't want to come here because that would just be boring. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to find my way out to here. I might even come back in here. Make a little animal. Find my way through. Okay, and so as you're doing this, you're going to fill the page. Here's a finished one, and you can see. It got a little crazy here, and when you start having kids making very thin lines or big areas that are empty, you'll know, oh, this one's not finished. So I would still have to connect here and here. You would see, I would purposely bring my line to where there was a lot of empty space as I go along. And then I would also say you could add little shapes in between. Like if you wanted to do figures of animals, you could see how I add little triangles and little organic teardrops to give me more, to make my figure more interesting. I have several here. Okay. And here you can see from the monsters on this side to the automobile, the man here, even putting little squares inside these things to give them more the appearance of a building. And if you look closely, here's my name, Mario, as it parts part of the line. So the whole beauty of this is as you start to overlap, you're going to get these things. And then as you add color, that whole lesson we have where you take a doodle and color it, and then every time you switch a shape, you add a different color, that really brings it to life. I have a bunch here. There we go. So I assume people are just drawing now, and well, we can't play music, right, Stephanie, because we have copyright infringement.
Yeah, I have to figure out what to do about that because so many videos have music. So I just have to look into it.
Yeah.
We have a question from Mrs. Rabick. She says, I notice he is not looping around. Is that intentional?
Oh, lines can loop?
I don't know what you mean by looping.
I know what she's talking about. Like so say I would start here, and in a square, a loop would be this. It's not intentional. You can loop as long as you don't go crazy, right?
Is that what you meant, Mrs. Rabick?
I was just going to say, I just recently learned that there's a website or an app or something called bensound.com that's free music that seems to be in some people's YouTube videos.
Oh, okay.
There's some that you have to pay for, but you can download like 2 or 3 minute snippets of some kind of generic type of background music. I'm just going to start using them.
Yeah, those are
Thank you, Laura.
public domain.
Yeah.
It's called Ben's Music.
It's called bensound.com. And I think there's a ben.sound.com, I think. You might want to just look at someone's YouTube video and kind of scroll down and if it has music in it and see if it's linked in the additional comments.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Well, I hope we answered your question, Mrs. Rabick. Don't know if you can hear me. This is really interesting.
So even though I wouldn't do rubrics traditionally, where it's the 4-3-2-1 model, I just thought it was repetitive, and really, I found that teachers, in doing repetitive work, did it to get it over with. So then you didn't really have genuine, authentic assessment. You really just had 100 scribbles, almost met the almost did this, did it well, did it that. So basically, I always just focus with my students on what was level 3, level 4. What are the top that I want you to achieve? So if I put this lesson into that, it would see, do you understand the definition of and the difference between natural and mechanical lines? And do you understand what the definition of abstract art? Were you able to create an interesting single line drawing to fill the surface? Were you able to draw a mechanical? No, this must be a different rubric. Yeah, and then it goes into color. But basically, my rubrics were basically, this is what the top level I want you to achieve. And so if I tell you what level 4 is, you'd figure out that level 3 will be, level 4 would be exceeding my expectations. Level 3 would be meeting my expectations. Level 2 would be approaching my expectations. And level 1 is, do you have a pulse? And so basically, I never was into just keep doing that and writing it over and over. I would put down a description of the lesson, how we accomplished everything. And I was lucky that at the end of my career, I had a principal who just didn't see the point in fighting me on it.
Mario, we have a question. Will there be a lesson handout later, or are we to grasp as we go?
I do not have a formal typewritten lesson. No, this is the first time I think I've ever shared this with anybody as an art teacher to art teacher. I think
taking pictures of what your notes are there, and
right.
If I want to do it, I could type it up myself.
These are the main 2 notes that I worked off of: the mechanical lines, natural lines, and geometric organic shapes. What is abstract? And then this was the main kind of a synthesis of how what I would have learned. Like I learned the hard way. Don't put lines too close together. Don't just let them go from one point to the same point over and over on a parallel level. And these are all samples that I actually, because every time I taught the lesson, I would physically do it with my students. So these are all lessons where I started, and then the next class came in, I took out another paper and I started it again. And so many of them were never finished. They just got started. And then I would walk around and see what the kids did. I think this is a finished one, where you can see, you could also work this way. If you work this way, you can see there's like a shark here. There's like a palm tree and a hand and a face. There's a factory up here. So I'm working this way down as opposed to working most of the time. Well, here again, I think this one's working top to bottom as well. And they could go any way you want. And then sometimes when the kids finish them, We turn them many different directions, and then we decide which is the best way to exhibit them. Because it's up to you. You're the artist. You make the decision. What works for you? I learned as a young artist, I used to love to draw, and then I was taught to draw growing up in Bushwick when my cousin was from Italy, and we weren't allowed out. The neighborhood was not the best neighborhood in the world. So we kind of all lived in the same house. And so what do? You draw. And I watched him draw. And I just started copying from coloring books. Instead of coloring in the coloring books, I would draw what I saw in the coloring books, and because he inspired me. And I saw I had a knack for it. But then I remember clearly I would draw something and I would say, hey, somebody would look and say, that's really good. And then I would show them the reference material and they would say, well, that doesn't look anything like that. So I quickly learned to just not even show my reference material to anybody. I just show them my drawing. And you know what? As I got older and better and more versed in the art of seeing, because that's what drawing is, it's the art of really meditatively seeing the world differently than non-drawers do. I learned how to do that better. But if I would have just said, oh, that doesn't look like the picture I just showed him and I quit, I can't do anything right, this is terrible, I wouldn't even have had a 33-year career in doing what I love. And that's the beauty of a job like being an art teacher. If it's something you love, I know it could be hard, I know, especially with the pandemic, but if it's something you love, you have a lot more going for you than somebody who just has to go to work every day. Okay, so at this point, I don't know how people feel. Do they want to draw for a little longer and then we can start talking about color?
Yeah, give us a couple more minutes.
Yeah,
to
yeah, I will.
work on designs. Jocelyn asked, it's a brilliant, simple way to teach organic and geometric. I'm wondering, do you prefer to use the terms mechanical and natural with line?
So when I talk about line, I usually talk about line as mechanical and the shapes that they form as geometric. And when I talk about natural, I talk about the lines are natural and the shapes that they form are organic shapes. I believe that's pretty much what's in the book, right? We talk about organic shapes as opposed to geometric shapes, and we talk about natural lines as opposed to mechanical. But
so if we are doing this in pencil, once we get the drawings that we like, you would go over it with Sharpie, correct?
right, I would test whatever you do. You can't have something that runs. You need something that won't run when you add watercolor or whatever you call. You could do this in colored pencil, or you could do this in marker. The water-based watercolors that I use, the liquid watercolors, they're not easy to control. But I had the advanced group and they all made mistakes and things ran over and things bled and things jumped the line. And that's why we always have that last part, which is the let's go over the mistakes by adding a repeating pattern. And some people chose the circle was always my favorite. You have you take a India ink circle, you leave a little light reflection in it and the color from underneath comes through. But I've had people do all sorts of things besides circles. You could take anything you want really and do it that way. Oh, here is the correct rubric points that I had. Follows directions to set up composition, shows understanding of natural and mechanical lines and how they form organic and geometric shapes, shows a good sense of design through the placement of lines, shapes, and use of color, understands the terms abstract, figurative, non-objective as demonstrated in his or her artwork and class discussion, and is able to paint flat and transitional colors, shows proper use and control of markers, paints, and brushes. So basically, when I had to justify, I never really thought about, back in the days of the 80s and 90s, you just made art and intuitively you know why you were making it. And then when we got to high levels of accountability, I always thought the accountability was more so that people, as they came in from the district, can easily understand what we know intuitively our students are learning. But it does help if you could get your kids to understand as well what they're doing almost intuitively by doing this, the amazing amount of knowledge that they're learning. Do we have a point where people can hold up their drawings and share with us, Stephanie?
We can do that now if you'd like.
No, give people some more time. But the main thing I would ask you is if you see big empty areas, then remember that idea of the line journey. Let your pen or pencil or whatever you're using take you into that journey. Yeah, I have to do it with. See, I just tested my calligraphy pen and I see blue when I just put a little water on it. So I would not use this calligraphy pen. I often use India ink and more importantly, most of the time Sharpies. The one thing I would focus would be like not making the line the same thickness and purposely making the line maybe taper in certain places and get skinny again and really giving the weight and the variety of line. Oftentimes when we draw, even when we're drawing realistically, what makes a drawing dynamic is that the artist doesn't use one weight of line. It's the variety of line that makes the drawing dynamic. And so that applies for abstraction as well. So once the first line is done in pencil, then you could take your pen and Sharpie and you could start doing what I call the tapered line and lines that end up getting thicker and thinner and so on. Well, maybe I could just paint on one of my old samples tonight. I don't have to go running looking for a Sharpie. Let's get one that's almost finished. This one's finished. Now, you'll see here I outlined the Sharpie. That was just for kids to see on camera. You would never outline the triptych line. In the finished pieces, the triptych line disappears and the shapes then take a life of their own as they cross over from one section to the next. And sometimes it's by accident. The shapes that you make and you start looking at them when you're painting, you're like, wow, look at this shape and this amazing shape I was able to make just by intersecting lines, and how different the lines on the mechanical side, the design on the mechanical side feels from the design on the organic side. So I don't want to
Anybody want to share?
I want to see. Let's
Hold on.
let's remove my spotlight.
Yeah, I'm going to, oops.
I'm going to put it in gallery so I can see everybody.
Yep. Okay.
Well, somebody's already
that's
added, Emily added color and everything. I mean, you are fast. Good
Helen.
job.
Let's wait, where did Helen go? Helen. Oh gosh, one at a time because I want to spotlight you guys. Now I can't. Spotlight for everyone. There you go. That's really good.
I like that. Amazing.
That's it. I like it. Looks like a guy with a really big bottom lip over here on the right hand side. Okay. Who else? Shelly, let me spotlight you. Where'd you go? Everybody keeps jumping around. Spotlight Shelly. You're going over your lines with the Sharpie? That looks really good.
That's right. Shelly, I would just then work on thickness and thinness. Make some parts a little thicker, some parts a little thinner, and have more variety that way.
Very
That's
nice.
fantastic.
Who else? Emily. Oh my God, Emily's already finished. Look at this.
Yeah, where's Emily? Let's spotlight Emily.
I'm right here.
Let me see if I can add spotlight. Okay, why isn't it letting me make spotlight? Replace spotlight. Okay, there we go. Wow.
I'm playing around with these markers that I have that have brush tips.
Oh yeah,
And to kind of activate them, I just dip them in a tiny bit of water and suddenly they become paint. And I like that they have that sharp tip so I can get right in those edges.
That's really nice.
I think I'll go back and thicken up some of the lines after
Right.
I apply the color.
Yeah, we always go back afterwards. That's a great, like where things got a little sloppy. That's where I tell them either thicken the line or add a repeating pattern throughout the whole composition.
Yeah, because my lines, you know, they're all the same thickness because I use this one
Right.
Sharpie, but I do want some variety. That one's really pretty.
Hi, Nearine.
Wow, Niren, that's beautiful.
You.
There's a name in there.
Oh yeah, my last name, De Silva.
Very cool. Love that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else want to share, Mrs. Rabick? Let me see if I can replace. Here we go. Wow, that's really cool.
Well
I
done.
like it. Very nice.
Well
Which
done.
direction it looks better. I feel like you got to turn it around.
Yeah, and then once you add color, you might change your mind completely.
That's the
Right.
thing about abstraction is that for everybody who looks at it, it looks better a different way. It's not, any one way. Okay, Mom wants to show hers. Very nice.
Cool.
Move it over to your right a little bit. There we go. And back it up a little bit so we can see the whole thing.
Oh,
Back up.
I do. Oh, Roberta, this is really good. I love the little windows you put in, and I love the profile faces of it. And the kids love it too. When they start really going on this, and this is why I do the practice so much, because when they start looking at, oh look, I'm just drawing this line, and then I'm making figures pop out of this line. It's like that Harold and the Purple Crayon.
Everybody's having such fun. I'm going to show mine. Let me see if
That's a beautiful painting. Whoever's on the screen, Roberta.
add spotlight. There we go. How's that one?
Hold on, it's hard to see right now. Your lines are okay. There it is. You're getting the white balance.
There we go. How's that?
Wow, that looks great. So, are you going to use this as part of your Kandinsky lesson?
Yes,
Oh,
actually.
I'm honored.
No, thank you. I mean, I've been sitting here like for a week trying to figure out how do I introduce this lesson? And sometimes it's the simplest things that we forget how to do because we're so focused on the end game here.
Yeah.
And being that I am completely remote adds another challenge because it's hard to do. I don't do daily lessons because it's too much for the kids. They all complain that they're bombarded with their other classes. So I've gotten used to giving a weekly project and I introduce it and then I let them go and then they hand it in. So, but I really like the idea of, I've used that term before. We're going to take our pencil on a little walk around the paper. And you reminded me about just the basics of mark making that we take for granted and the kids know nothing about. So have them get comfortable with that. So maybe I'll, scaffold it, do a week with mark making, not a week, but assign it for that week's project, have them play with mark making and then come back and introduce this and do my presentation on abstract artists and tie it all together. And
Wonderful.
so you've given me a lot to think about in terms of presenting it to the kids and how to hand it to them.
Well,
So,
I'm glad that I was able to do this because I can't tell you how good I feel. It feels like a weight has been lifted off my shoulder. I've been so tense with family and this and that. And just teaching and making art again, been
That's why this group is so important. This is where we can screw up, make mistakes, share ideas, soundboard with each other and back and forth and ask for suggestions. And that's why this is so great. Okay, we didn't even get to the color yet. So
well, I'm going to start talking about now.
yeah,
I'm going to see if
go
I
ahead.
could
Oh,
spotlight.
wow. Is that yours? That is yours.
Well, that's not the one I just did. These are
No, but that's one. Okay. Replacing spotlight. There you go.
all right. So
Wow. Wow. That
let's see.
almost looks like a comic book explosion.
Right. This is these are no. This is not my work. I didn't make this. I can tell you who made it. Jihan Bey, who never came and picked up their work at the end of the year and became part of my permanent collection.
Doesn't that break your heart?
Yeah.
I mean,
But
it's
then
great for us
it gives
because
us
then we
great
have
samples.
samples, right? But
And then I had some 8th graders who, like, not in the advanced art, but in the general art, where I knew they would take their portfolios, and then I would find them in the hallway because they're more interested the last day of school of going out and running into the schoolyard. And there's like, I'm like, you don't understand. Put this under your bed. Put your artwork away, and then 10 years from now, you'll be happy you found it again. It's not like when you find your old English lit compositions and you actually have to sit there and read them. You could look at an artwork and it brings back everything. It brings back who you were, what you were with, who you were with. It brings everything back. And so I always stress the fact of keeping their work and then culling it over the years.
you just reminded me quickly, I'm going to say, I did an alumni painting party last week with kids who graduated from my school, the school that I teach at.
Mm-hmm.
And again, when kids run out and graduate and leave all their work behind, it's heartbreaking. But one of the kids who graduated from my classes, my school, came back and did a painting with us in this class last week. And
nice.
she's a teacher now too.
That's great.
And she said, and she pointed out that she still had one of her paintings that she did in my class hanging at her mom's house that she loves to this day. And
right.
you don't know how good that makes you feel.
And that's the beauty. That's the beauty of Arts Connection, because when those paintings come back professionally framed, and these are mats professionally cut and beveled and scored, and the frames are not are expensive, nice frames. These kids then have these pieces in their homes, their grandmother's homes or wherever. They're just for life. Once you frame them and get them back from Arts Connection, it's amazing. So let's talk about color. Here you can see it more heavy-handed. I teach flat color. We talk about the difference between flat and transitional color. Again, when I'm teaching, my focus really is on realistic drawing and rounding of the form and making things three-dimensional. That's where I specialize in. I get kids ready for high school portfolios and really drawing what you see. But it's the same skills that we use in this abstract work. Transitioning, making the color fade from dark to light, making the color change from one color to another, or working on very flat, super, like comic book style color. Speaking of comic book, he put the Punisher in there. I see that he snuck that right in there. And these circles that we see here, these are all the places where, oh, my paint made this splatter and it looks really terrible and it has this ring and I really hate it. Look, my painting is ruined. Now your painting isn't ruined. Everything that you think is bad becomes part of this pattern that you're making, big and small. Let's have variety. I would have asked him to put a little light in there so the color came through from underneath like a shiny bubble. And then sometimes it's like there's only a few mistakes and like, well, like here it was total black. Those were probably really big things where they were not happy with, but he kind of fixed it and made this little cloud mushroom. And then sometimes it's like, well, now you started with these, but look, it's empty. So then they have to add more, even where there are no mistakes. This is another one. You can see it's not always circular. In this one, this is just a stencil I had in the classroom, and the student used it. I wouldn't lie to say if I didn't think it looked like little spermatozoa, but still. I call them tadpoles. I love this painting. I'm sorry she never came back and got it. This little beauty of this ring here, this little flamingo kind of creature here is amazing. And then these things. And then the beauty of like in the circle is don't just make all the circles or all the patterns on top. Let some come from behind. So now things are swimming in and around and behind. So you're creating some depth. So like, for example, let it come through or behind, or like in here where is a circle. The circle is going behind this shape. So you're creating very simple depth using these circles. They don't all have to be always floating on the top. Some could be peeking out between shapes, and it creates another dimension. So these are just some samples that I've kept over the years, and you can see how bright those watercolors are. This one is really, you can see the figurative. They really got into the shark, the basketball player, the cross, the boat, the whatever kind of creature here. And these don't have, I would have come in here and start saying, here's where you see the mistake. Here you see things where kids are like, the color bled, or the color just, it's a watermark because I left my brush on there too long. So this is where I would generally start saying to them, this is where you're going to introduce pattern. Pick something that you want to introduce as a pattern that's going to go throughout your composition. So let's talk about adding color and the lesson on color itself. Like the line paper, like when we did this to build up your skills, so that I don't just give you a big piece of paper and now you're struggling and you're like, no, I want you to build sequence, and you can see variation, thick and thin. I do the same with color. Small little pieces of scrap paper. And I just tell them, draw me two shapes, one overlapping over another. Give me a geometric, two geometrics, two organic. And then this is what you paint. And you paint this until you show me you're controlling the brush and that you're physically able. We talk about using the brush on the tip, walking out, how do we blend it to the color can change. This F means show me a flat color, show me transitional colors. Transitional color can change from one color to another, or it could just change from dark to light. A tool that if you're working from home, I mean, you can do this all in colored pencil, are the watercolor pencils. Because with this, and I think most of you have seen them before, it's very simple, like the brush that other teacher was showing us. The watercolor pencils allow you to add color and control it a little bit more. Where's the paper I'm going to use? Okay. They allow you to control and add color a little bit more. And then by adding the color, you could go right to the edge. And then if all is correct here, I have a brush. I mean, I like vibrant watercolors. This is a really nice set of semi-moist watercolors. You could almost see how rich they are in the pan. But for working at home, just doing this in color pencil and talking about, you could do nice transition with color pencil. And you can even blend color pencil a little bit. I'm working on the side. So if I'm picking this up, it should start to make the color that I want. And then I could let it fade, work it to the edge and let it fade. And it's the simple, this is probably one of the earliest lessons we ever learned, where anytime a shape changes, one color doesn't go from one shape to another. These are not working as good as I want, maybe because I'm working on just copy paper right now. But Mr. Asaro is not ready, did not bring tissues or anything. But generally, I mean, I don't have to say the whole line in color, but if I could come in here and add more, or even dip the pencil in water, I think you'll get more blending. And now you have to look at your work. One of your shapes could end up starting here, and if I look at this shape, it goes all the way up into here. Does that mean it all has to be orange, or a blend of orange? No, I could teach you the color wheel. I have the color wheel up and talk about making what is orange going to go into. Obviously, orange can't go into purple, but it could easily go into yellow or red. and work on and look using the color wheel to have them do transitional color changes. And so on. So here you can see where I'm taking the yellow into here. So I don't have, it doesn't have to just be one color just because the shape is so big. I have to apologize. This is copy paper, so the paper is almost disintegrating as I add color to it. But I'm gonna continue sort of like that and working my way around the painting. And this is the part of the art class where I love, where for now, for the next, back in the days when we did it in person, for the next week, 2 weeks, to come in, take their work out, give out the folders. Everybody has their job. Everybody has their responsibility. Everybody knows what they're doing. And my administrators would always note how, the Danielson method, that these kids are self-directed. And they sit and they'll sit for, now this is 7, 8 days of painting. It's come in, get to work. They start talking amongst each other. And this was the one thing I remember from all my observations, how they were amazed. Jocelyn, are you there? Jocelyn is a witness to this, how they would just be talking with each other about their work. And yeah, sure, they would talk about other things and play music. And such a nice time to be an art teacher, just walking around, watching them make work. I think Joan is joining us here for the end of the meeting.
Oh, okay.
I just let her in. So basically, without painting this whole composition, I'll show you some other samples of, this is on a larger level, flat one color transitional, an analogous going from red into yellow, complementary, 2 colors that are complement each other, using warm colors, using cool colors. I mean, it's up to you what you're teaching and how you want to do it. Joan, if you could hear us, thanks for joining us. And so that's basically where it takes us. I think we're coming up to the end of our meeting, so.
We've got about 10 minutes left and no rush. I never chase anybody out, so if everybody wants to hang
Well,
out
I
and
think
chat and work.
basically, this is again, I just don't give them now they work so hard on this beautiful composition. It's a shame if you just gave them, and I'm talking about when we're back in person, obviously when you have to adapt for online learning. It's a shame if you gave them this beautiful composition and then really didn't give them the sequential tools to be confident with color and application of color. And again, explain to them beforehand, mistakes will be made. Try to make as least mistakes as you can. I'd have a little trick with the middle schoolers where you'd bring it up, and frankly, I would give grades that were just fictitious. I would just to motivate them. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to count how many times you weren't able to handle the brush, or you went outside the shape you were coloring, or things got really too muddy. And I put a number there. So it was like a little game. All right. You got, how many, you had only 4 areas. You had 6 areas. You had 10 areas. But at the same time, it's like, I don't want them to say, oh, we're just going to fix the mistakes. Let me be careless at this point. I want them to be careful at every level, knowing that don't worry if you make a mistake, because the last part is the adding of the pattern and masking any of the areas where the color went awry, and then adding more to it to make it part of the artwork, to make it part of that pattern. So I'm going to end there, because let's spend the last 5 minutes of having everybody just color and paint and draw. And
This was delightfully simple and fun, and a very new way to teach this lesson, which is great. Thank you, Mario.
yeah, I think you've inspired me. Maybe at NAEA 2022 when we're in New York City,
You're gonna do a workshop?
I'll workshop this.
All right.
And that would be good. It's always great to have the conference in your hometown, and you don't have to rent a hotel and all the other expenses.
This is true.
All right, I'm gonna remove spotlight, and I want to be in gallery and see everybody as they're working.
I've had fun using these Posca acrylic pens, which help
Oh,
with control. They're acrylic paint in a pen.
nice.
You just
Oh,
take
I
it.
love those.
I do, because you can just blend. I was like, oh, look at that. You can just blend the, and do that gradient.
Oh, wow. Can we
Yeah.
spotlight that? Can I do spotlighting? Let me see. Spotlight for everyone. I did it. Oh, yeah, I see.
Mhm.
Now, but it's a thicker paint though, right? It's very
It-
thick.
It's not that thick. I mean, it's watery. So you have to have control. I mean, you wouldn't have been elementary, so you can't really do,
Yeah.
well, the fifth graders, yes. But it's a lot of fun to work with.
That is nice.
Yeah.
The beauty of the thick line with the Sharpie or the ink, and then the watercolor, just the light translucent of it. It's a nice combination. And don't forget that black border really then makes colors pop. Black constrains the pictures and makes the colors pop forward.
Mhm. It does. The watercolor pencils, I have trouble with those also.
Yeah.
I have to learn how to work with those.
I think there are different qualities. I might say School Smart might not be the best. That's the generic Saks Arts and Crafts. School Smart is their generic brand. I'm sure
Oh.
there's better ones that have better pigment and work better.
Yeah, I'll have to work with that one.
But they are good. And I've seen kids in my class in the past that they do a great job with them. Because you just add a little color and then just a little bit of water and let it move and blend.
The water soluble crayons also give a nice color. They're a little stronger than the water soluble colored pencils. They're not as thin, of course.
Right. It's hard to get into those small spots.
Could you possibly go back to some of your examples and talk about color as we look at the finished pieces?
The ones that I showed?
Yeah.
The photographs or the actual live ones I had?
Oh, I don't, either one. Just because when I was looking at them, I was really only looking at line.
Right. Let's go to the photographs because those I know, those kids took them home and I photographed them for a reason.
Yeah.
They were their level of work. So
you-
basically you can see here how she did what I asked not to do, but it comes out nice. Like if you're doing a landscape, especially if it's horizontal, to have that last one as your whole, it's all one shape. This is all one shape. So look at the job you have to do. Hi. My daughter wants a brownie. Say hi.
Hello.
To all the art teachers. She used to be a great artist. She's been getting a little lazy on me. I'll give you a brownie if you do your artwork for school that's due for your yearbook. Tomorrow? Together? You got witnesses together? All right. Go look in my sunflower seed jar. I hid a brownie in there for you.
How old is she?
10.
10. Oh my goodness.
She'll never look at my sunflower seed for brownies.
So you were saying you would prefer that whole shape on that left side to be one color?
No, I wouldn't. I always caution kids about leaving it as, because there was no intersection here, but it works. The intersection happens here in the middle, but sometimes you get when there's no intersection. You look in my jar of sunflower seeds and you'll see it. And so it becomes one shape. It's not a problem, but if you painted it all one color, it could work. I mean, I'm not going to say it doesn't work, but I like how she now uses it as a way to show transitional color. And again, this is another lesson in itself, the color wheel and what colors transition into other colors. Obviously, you can't transition red into green. You have to find the journey to get there. Color is a whole other lesson. But here in all these shapes, even she put the tree, she kept it traditionally green, but then she blends out of this brown. And then the idea is when you leave one shape, even though this is clearly part of this heart, because this line is here, the color stops and another color has to take over. I'm sorry? Yeah. Ask mom. And so, like even this blue star, you see how that little bit of the blue star had to change colors? Because you don't, colors have to show a change when you hit another line. You want to keep the shapes kind of true to these shapes that you make. And then that makes you see these shapes better. So let's look at a few more. All right, so here, this beautiful organic creature. And I love how this shape here comes in here and makes almost like an eyeball. And then the two hands, again, using mostly single color, like purple. And the other thing, when you're using colors, then you can start showing abstract paintings, especially Kandinsky and other things, and show how color, how you balance color in a composition. So if I'm using yellow here, my eye automatically picks up all the other yellows. So yellow here, I often encourage them to work one color at a time. So let's put our yellows in and then make decisions about where to balance yellow, 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 red, right? You have this red here. You could balance this red here with this red up here. So when you're using color now, it's a whole nother segment of lessons on balancing the colors, letting them, the colors just the same way as you use lines and shapes in the composition. Color directs your eyes. Color makes your eyes move through a composition. So here, we have little dots. If I can get bigger on her work. Again, you can see the tapering of lines, not many mistakes. I think these polka dots were her a conscious decision on her part. And this is one of my favorites. And here you can see we're using the circles. Some circles look like they're coming from behind objects. Other circles are floating free, and then leaving that little window to give it that little idea of like a bubble, a dark floating bubble with the bright color coming out from behind. And so you change.
Are those circles Sharpies or India ink?
Or it could be oftentimes I would give Sharpies, but then I would say you're filling in with India ink because I didn't have the budget for them to just like the frames too.
Yeah,
you start you do it with the Sharpie, use a ruler for the Sharpie, but then you paint, I had another section in my room, which was the India ink section, which can be really messy. But when you were working, you take your work to the back and you then fill in with India ink pretty easy. And that way you're not going through, 6 dozen Sharpies every lesson.
Right, cheaper.
It's cheaper. And India ink is, again, it's like telling kids, here's a photograph, here's a record. Like, what is this India ink? It's like they're amazed that there's this thing actually ink in a bottle that you could purchase it separate from a pen. So
I love that work. I love that. So this is interesting to look at these really closely and see where there's tradition, color that's flat and color that's traditional. Transitional, sorry, yeah. Transitional.
Right, and it's really up to them. And sometimes they mix and match, and some kids did them totally flat. Some kids are just more comfortable in painting flat, and they kept it as a very strong pop art, very flat. And these are more kind of give you a more, again, transitional colors. I would call more organic, and the flat colors I think of them as more mechanical.
I like how she went from cool to warm mostly.
Right, and that's the other things. As you go, you could make it accidental, or you could start really talking about these choices. Are you going to use complementary colors? Are you going to use analogous colors? Let's talk about using a warm palette to a cool palette, which again is another difference between the besides natural to mechanical.
Right.
All right. Why am I not moving away from this photograph?
I like the flames that she put in there.
Yeah. I had such great students at the end of my career. And the fact that I was able to, students came in 6th grade and they're like, who wants music? Who wants drama? Who wants art? Who wants dance? And then once that was happening. When I first started working with anybody who wanted art just went to an art class, and there was 2 art teachers. So I quickly, when I transferred there, I said, why are you doing it this way? There's 2 of us. Why don't we now audition them and look at where their skill level is? Because you look at art, people who make art like readers. What level are you reading on? Except here's a problem. In reading, at least everybody has a sequential reading lessons from the time they're pre-K on. When in art, some kids never did art. Some kids did art. Some kids are naturally gifted at it. Some kids struggle but love it and get better at it. So they're all on different levels. So once we did that, we would then divide them as talent group, intermediate group, and then we'd make 2 classes, and then we'd have the kids in the middle, and then we would fudge around, like come on this way and come on that way. And some kids after a while would they would not be able to keep up in the talent group, and it wasn't a shame. Talk to them about which you could go to the intermediate group. You're going to be at the top of your game at the intermediate group, and you're going to get better, because I was an intermediate artist. I was an artist that didn't draw what it looked like. You're all going to be, it's just about getting better. It's about getting better. And then having the talent group. I don't know why I'm not able to change photos. Oh, there I am. Having the talent group was such a joy for the last 15 years of my career at that school. And then I would have art club and allow those kids then to move on to schools like LaGuardia High School of Art and Design and High School of Art and Design, Fashion Industry of Technology. And I'm only sorry that I didn't really keep touch with my kids, because it's kind of creepy for an old man to try to keep in touch with middle school kids. But I would love one day if some of my students would say, like, I would have loved to have a networking group called, Students of Mr. Asaro. There are literally thousands of them. And then they could use that as a way to share. I'm having an art show, or I'm doing this, or I'm working in this company and we're looking for graphic designers. It would have been just it was something I'm sorry we never got off the ground.
It's not too late with social media. Gosh,
I suppose.
You could find them.
If you have a personal Facebook page, they could find you.
Right. And I mean, that used to happen when I taught, at which point I would admonish them for finding me, and then I would check their profile. And if I could see everything on their profile, I would say, if this isn't changed in a week, I'm going to let your parents know that you're posting on Facebook without any privacy. Everything's public. So I would do
Well, that
that.
kind of defeats the purpose of inviting them to.
No. But if we made a site specific, I couldn't have my students on my Facebook page. It's just inappropriate. But if we had a specific art Facebook page, like we have a specific Nikata UFT page. Nobody sees my private stuff on that page, and it's all about art and teaching. I would love to have, and that's something I could probably track down a student and say, would you start the page? And I have a whole book of all the kids that went through my talent program, because I had them make bios, and we had senior shows every year. We took 15 to 20 kids every year, and we highlighted their work as the kids who did portfolios for high school. And so I could easily have somebody and say, would you want to do this, and find and then see how many people we could get, and have it as a, it doesn't have to be students of Mr. Asaro. It could just be, we could call it the school, Marie Curie Fine Arts or something.
I think I got carried away.
Okay.
Looking at
Am
my
I still
work.
sharing? I'm going to stop sharing. And
That was really helpful. Thank you so much.
Sorry, I forget sometimes that we're still sharing. And okay, I'm going to go eat some dinner. I didn't even have my brownie. So I would just love to see what people have, if they could hold it up to camera.
Let's do a gallery view so everybody's.
Yeah, I'm on gallery view now.
I don't know if you could see mine.
And this will all be on YouTube, right? That's amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you, Abby.
Yep. Actually, I started the recording late. I thought I did it and I didn't. So a little bit of the beginning was cut off.
That's fine.
But I caught it. So this is great. This was a lot of fun and very therapeutic, Mario. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you all.
Please,
And,
please volunteer to do it again.
Thank you so much.
oh, me?
Yes. Or
Well,
anyone else, if anyone else would like to volunteer. Hi, Joan, there you are. If anyone else would like to volunteer to run a session, please contact me. Doesn't have to be immediately. We can plan it for a month or so from now. I'm happy to work with you. Please come back. Please stay in touch. If you have ideas, questions, requests, whatever, contact me. And thank you for joining us today.
yeah, thank you. This is good. I do have lots of lessons, but they're all packed up in a garage. But I'm glad I took this one out. And yeah, let's hopefully things more will come. I'll see what I find. Thank
Great.
you, everybody.
Have a good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you so much.
night.
Bye-bye.
All right. Bye. Good to see you.
Bye.
Bye.
That was great.
It was a great session. All right. Logging off. Bye.
Bye.